Okay, thank you very much for a really wonderful day, and I will try very hard to keep for my 15 minutes. I'm going to put a timer on. Ta-da! Okay, so my presentation is about my own practice. I'm an artist as well as an academic, but primarily an artist, and I work with choreography, and I'm a creative writer, and I've been making work for 30 years. I'm going to start with moss, and I'll also end with moss. These are some photographs of some moss in the Gerra in West Cork. And here's another one. And I started this journey with Robin Wall Kimmerer's extraordinary book called Gathering Moss. Some of you might know that, but I'll come back to this. I'm also really interested in native Irish dye stuffs. Here's just a page from a book that was published in 1982 called Traditional Dye Stuffs in Ireland by Breed Mahon, or Mahon. And you can see here how there are the plants, the Latin name, and then also the names in Irish. I'm going to start with a very quick, zippy review of my practice, which has involved textiles. This is a photograph from an installation from 1997 called Mouthplace. And it included the installation of 30,000 sewing needles hanging from red thread. It was a CD-ROM installation. You can't really see it at the back there, but it's on a table, on a sewing table. And it was with one of those really old-fashioned Apple Macs that was huge. But it was a digital art project that involved about 70 different sites, and they all involved creative writing. I'm just going to read you one of them very quickly. In war, the women would embroider the faces of their captors slowly closed. Though they selected colours that befit the time of year and spent time on their designs, their silk would clot into a sewn frieze of black red. These bodies were sent back across the border, strapped to floating biers. Embroider, to embellish with fictitious details and exaggerations. This is a choreographic work from 2002-03. It's dance theatre. Again, it was a choreographic work, and it had a whole text that went with it. Here's a very small excerpt. It worked. This is a section around Sleeping Beauty. She told me that if I bathed the distaff with blood, strange alchemies would come upon me. She told me that if I span and pricked my finger, I could exchange blood for knowledge. She told me this gently, holding me close to her. And then from another section, which was about Arachne, and this was a very choreographic section, so it's a small text, but it was used in an embodied way. Arachne hid the spindles of self-silk, but loved making them. And even though this work was made 20 years ago, I still feel that choreography in me, self-silk. This is a piece from 2019, which is just a work in progress because then the world fell apart. This was an umbrella that told you stories when it rained. This is a piece that I'm probably most well known for, which is the knitting map from 2005. And this is from an exhibition, the image there from Mapping Climate Change, the Knitting Map and the Tapestry Project, which is at the Berman Museum of Art. And it's going to be at the Berman Museum of Art, sorry, at the Riston Art Galleries in Wisconsin later this year. And this is a small extract from some of the writings about that. And let me tell you about the densities of colour, the drench of lilac drifting up from the crypt floor. They call it amethyst and heather, and here it is turned into the dimensional hexagons of a honeycomb cable, or the tiny one-by-one cables running like orderly veins into basket weaves. So this was a piece that was made by more than 2,000 people, mostly working class older women from Cork. The Lady of Cloonshannagh Bog. Wincott Heckett, 2013, is a narrative whose palimpsestic layers echo the knitting map, as she is discovered and then studied by the archaeological textile expert Elizabeth Wincott Heckett in the same year that the knitters in St. Luke's are knitting their weather and their city in a collaborative and capricious knotting of yarn. The significance of bog as an otherworldly place between solid and liquid, history and contemporary, reality and mythology echoed the place of my birth, neither wholly Irish nor wholly British, but liminal and unknowable. And that's a quote from Catherine Harper. During mechanical peat cutting in a private bog just off the N4 between Termonbarry and Strokestown in County Roscommon, a female bog body is discovered, but not before she is violently shredded, uprooted from the peat, her bones and clothes spread out by the machine. It is May 2005, and just over 100 miles away in Cork City, the knitting map is quietly being made in a crypt. The textile archaeologist Elizabeth Wincott Heckett is called to the National Museum of Ireland to examine the shredded clothing. She must piece together hundreds of small fragments of fabric, but eventually she is, quote, able to identify 7 different textile types, including a possible pile woven cloth that may have been a shaggy mantle. 5 textiles of excellent quality indicated that the young woman was a high status individual. So this is the background to some of the work that I've been doing for Tapestries, and I started this work as part of the Fulbright project in the autumn of 2021, and these images are from that work where I worked with dancers around the pressures of the bog and using language and verb and utterance as a way to depict that. Though daunted at the havoc in front of her, she is also enchanted. In her careful hands, she touches something that last felt human touch 1,300 years ago. She is an alchemist of textiles like this, partial, drenched in the bog for 1,000 years and more, a ragged constellation of fibres. Under her steady and careful eye, they begin to give up their woven histories. With the Irish peatland bog as theme and metaphor, Tapestries evokes the story of a young woman lost in the bog in the 7th century and discovered in 2005 during mechanical peat digging. She is found with her clothes preserved. I use this science to embody glimpses into her life and what her story tells us about femininity, ecology, power, and the warming of the world. Tapestries makes connections between the female labour of textile making, the moving female body, and our relationship to landscape. This is an image of Anna Pillett, who I worked with in Colorado as part of my Fulbright, and the textile is made from by the textile artist Sasha DeConnick. And this was an exploration about my interest in this shaggy mantle that was found on this bog skeleton, and the fact that the peat then produces the bog that she's then entrapped in. So this this connection between her clothes and the environment as a kind of trope to think about our connection or our lack of connection with the natural world. Here's another image of that. I'm just going to show you a really short video of work with chroma key technologies that I worked with in Boulder.
And eventually, oh, see, then she just appeared.
Yeah.
Okay, so all that's happening there, it's a green screen technology, and it's looking at the dancer, and where the green is on her textile, that's projecting behind her, and it's projecting a video of moss from the bog. So it's very preliminary, but it was just beginning R&D for this work. So we'll go again. This is another image from work in progress that I did at the end of that residency, and I'm really interested both in the use of creative writing and technology, but also really simple techniques like shadow play. So I was working here with thinking about how, using the ideas around speculative history about how these clothes were made and who made them, and using shadow play to do that. Here's some more images of that. And this is our most recent work. So currently I'm funded by a dance bursary from the Arts Council in Ireland. About a month ago, we were up in Cloonshannagh bog where this bog skeleton was found. And she was found in this area that you can see on this image here. And as an artist, I'm doing all right, I've got 4 minutes. I'm somebody who uses writing to enter into practice, but also to come out of that practice. And the moving body is always a very important part of that process. And I'm collaborating with this textile artist, Veronica Santorum, and she's woven, this is just a textile to experiment with, but she's woven this textile, she spun it as well, and using very plants that would have been around in the 7th century to colour it. So the colours that we have on this textile here are listed there, meadowsweet and alum, and then the greens that you've got are really interesting because it's meadowsweet with iron, and then Weldon alum and gorse and alum. So I'm using embodied somatic practices in the space itself to explore both the textile and the environment that we're in. And as you can see, I've got wellies on because we're in a bog, and you can't really be in a bog without having wellies. So most of what you can see in front of you there is heather. We had a real, trying to find out about this bog body has been kind of extraordinary, because I came across the story from being asked to review a book proposal for Cork University Press, and it was an essay in there because it's quite an obscure article about this bog skeleton. And it's been really, the National Museum of Ireland, who hold the bog skeleton, have not allowed me in to see it. But they have allowed me to see the report on it. But I was being looked at by a camera, so I had to hand transcribe it and then type it up and send it to my collaborators. But in that, it had the name of the people who found the bog skeleton and the guard to whom a bag of bones were taken to Longford Guard Station. So I got in touch with the guard the week before, and this story is all about why I am actually in the right place there on the bog. And I didn't get a reply to the email, but we went to Longford Police Station and left a message, and he was delightful and came to our Airbnb and took us, and because we'd been in the wrong part of the bog, and he, even though he's had a really serious job, head of crimes unit, brought his stepladder and took us to this part of the bog where she was found, which we never would have found on our own. And what's interesting is I'm kind of above where she was found, and the area where the bog was cut, we did find it, and it's all been fenced off. So there's 20 years of growth, or 18 years of growth in that area, which is kind of extraordinary as well. And then the lovely garda Ray Greenan actually left us his stepladder, so we were actually able to stay there all afternoon because we couldn't get out without his stepladder. All of which is to say that for me, then, this research, it's not just about me rolling around in the bog with a beautiful piece of textile art. It's actually, for me, that's research that actually will come into the writing, and that I've already worked choreographically with these the language of botany and embodiment, and for me this work, so I wanted to leave you with this image of embodied work with textiles that will feed my writing practice. And as I'm going to end with moss. This is an image of Cladonia rangiferia, which is reindeer moss. Now, funnily enough, there are not any reindeers in Ireland, but the beautiful light that you can see in this photograph, which was photographed by Ben Burns, who I'm collaborating with, is also a sound artist, is because we got up at ridiculous o'clock to go and record the dawn chorus. And the day before, when we'd been on the bog, this particular moss, which is everywhere on this moss, which is extraordinary, was really, it's a beautiful green, pale green, and a big contrast to the heather, which is most of the other place. And the day before, it was incredibly brittle and just solid, and the kind of brittle that you felt like if you touched it would just kind of collapse. So we were trying to avoid it. When we went at 4 o'clock in the morning the next day, it was soft and beautifully damp. And then the following day, or later that day, when Garda Ray Greenan took us onto the bog, it was brittle again, and it held the moss still. And you can't really see in this image, but the botany of this is kind of extraordinary. It grows between 4 and 11 millimeters a year, so it grows really slowly. And it is actually, even though it's called a moss, it's actually a lichen, and it has this incredible structure. So I know I'm going to write from and into the moss as it relates to the textiles and the story. And that's me done.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.